The war for existence itself was about to begin, and humanity had just volunteered to lead the charge. 3 months after the battle, the research station on Kepler 442b had been transformed into something unprecedented in human history. Where once a small team of archaeologists had studied ancient ruins, now stood the first Academy of Guardian Sciences, staffed by the brightest minds from dozens of human worlds and protected by beings who had once been instruments of cosmic destruction. Sarah stood on the observation deck, watching human students work alongside the 3 reformed hunters who had chosen new names for themselves: Unity, Complexity, and Hope. The sight still seemed impossible to her, but it had become wonderfully routine. Her transformation continued daily. The Guardian knowledge had integrated so thoroughly with her human consciousness that she sometimes forgot where Sarah Chen ended and the cosmic awareness began. She could perceive the flow of life force across entire star systems, could sense the dimensional currents that connected all matter in the galaxy, and could manipulate energy in ways that made human technology seem quaint by comparison. But she was still fundamentally human. She still enjoyed coffee in the morning, still laughed at inappropriate jokes, and still felt the peculiar human need to give hugs to beings who didn't strictly require physical comfort. The integration proceeds well, Keith Morathan observed. Approaching with the gliding motion that had become effortless since its healing, the ancient Guardian had also been changed by their partnership. Its consciousness had adapted to include human concepts of humor, spontaneity, and what Sarah called creative stubbornness. Better than well, Sarah replied, gesturing toward the training fields where human volunteers were learning to manipulate reality itself under the guidance of their reformed allies. We've got candidates coming in from every human world. The colonial authority initially tried to classify the whole program, but you can't hide something like this. She pulled up a holographic display showing the spread of Guardian knowledge across human space. What had begun as her desperate transmission during the battle had blossomed into a network of information that was fundamentally changing human civilization. 17. Worlds now have active Guardian hybrid programs, Sarah continued. Mars has established a dimensional engineering department. The Europa colony is working on consciousness preservation technology. Even Earth has finally admitted that maybe there are things happening out here that require attention. Keith Morathan's harmonics carried amusement. Your species adapts quickly. Too quickly, some might say. That's exactly why we're going to survive this, Sarah said confidently. The Devourers expect their enemies to behave like the old Guardians, ancient, wise, predictable. They're not prepared for beings who invent new solutions every few decades. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Sarah accepted the call, and the image of Admiral Martinez from Fleet Command appeared in the holographic display. Dr. Chen, or should I say Guardian Chen, we've received concerning reports from the Centauri monitoring stations. Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions beyond the heliopause. Whatever's coming, it's big. Sarah felt the familiar tingle of enhanced perception activating. Across several dimensions, she could sense the approaching presence, not Devourers themselves, but their servants. A much larger force than the 3 hunters she had faced. How long do we have? She asked. 18 months, possibly 24 if they maintain current velocity. Sarah nodded calmly. More than enough time. The Admiral's expression showed surprise. Dr. Chen, our intelligence suggests this could be a full extermination fleet. Hundreds of Devourer constructs, possibly thousands. Admiral, 6 months ago humanity didn't know that cosmic horrors existed. Now we've got human Guardian hybrids, reformed hunter allies, and the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that fought these things for millions of years. Trust me. 18 months is plenty of time for humans to come up with something appropriately crazy. After ending the transmission, Sarah walked to the Academy's central planning chamber, where representatives from every human world were already gathering via holographic link. The sight filled her with distinctly human pride. Her species didn't just adapt to new situations, they enthusiastically dove into them. Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary beings, Sarah began, addressing the assembly. We have incoming hostiles. Time to show the galaxy what humans do when someone threatens our home. The next several hours were spent in frantic planning that would have given traditional military strategists nightmares. Instead of focusing on defensive preparations, The human representatives began proposing increasingly audacious offensive strategies. Dr. Kim from the Mars facility suggested using dimensional folding to create tactical black holes. The Europa team proposed uploading volunteer consciousnesses into Hunter-class constructs, creating reverse-engineered weapons loyal to humanity. Earth's representatives wanted to attempt something they called weaponized evolution, using Guardian genetic manipulation, technology to create new life forms specifically designed to consume devourer constructs. You are all completely insane, Unity observed. Its reformed consciousness still struggling with human logical processes. These plans violate fundamental principles of physics. Physics is just suggestions, Dr. Martinez from the Luna colony replied cheerfully. We've been violating those suggestions since we figured out how to make fire. Keth Morathan provided the voice of cosmic experience. In principle, Unity is correct. These strategies are reckless beyond measure. They could fail catastrophically. But, the ancient guardian continued, its harmonics carrying distinctly human mischief, they are also unprecedented. The Devourers have never faced opponents who deliberately choose the most dangerous possible solutions to problems. Sarah felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Her old friend was learning to think like a human. Over the following days, the Academy became the coordination center for the most ambitious project in human history. Every human world contributed resources, personnel, and ideas that ranged from brilliant to completely deranged. Most importantly, they contributed something the galaxy hadn't seen in millions of years: hope combined with absolute refusal to accept defeat. The reformed hunters worked alongside human scientists, their alien perspectives combining with human creativity to produce innovations that neither could have achieved alone. Hope specialized in consciousness technology, helping humans develop ways to survive even the destruction of their physical bodies. Complexity focused on dimensional engineering, creating weapons that could exist in multiple realities simultaneously. Unity worked on communication systems that would allow instant coordination across galactic distances. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, no longer just a Guardian hybrid, but something entirely new, a bridge between human ambition and cosmic knowledge. She could perceive the vast scope of what they were attempting and understand why it should be impossible, while simultaneously possessing the fundamentally human conviction that impossibility was just another problem to be solved. 6 months before the arrival of the Devourer fleet, Sarah received a message that changed everything. It came through quantum entanglement channels that shouldn't have existed, transmitted by consciousnesses that had been thought extinct for eons. This is Keeper of the Third Spiral, last guardian of the Andromeda Galaxy. We have monitored your transmissions. We are not alone. Hidden guardians throughout the universe are awakening. The war begins again, but this time we will not fight alone. The message included coordinates for a gathering point beyond the galaxy's edge, where surviving guardians were converging to meet these strange new hybrid beings called humans. Sarah smiled as she forwarded the message to every human world. The Devourers thought they were coming to eliminate a few troublesome primitives. Instead, they were about to encounter the combined forces of human ingenuity, guardian wisdom, and billions of beings who had just discovered they weren't alone in the universe. The age of hiding was over. The age of alliance had begun. Standing on the observation deck as ships from dozens of human worlds arrived daily, Sarah Chen, xenoarchaeologist, guardian hybrid, and apparently catalyst for galactic revolution, watched the sunrise over a world that had become the birthplace of something entirely new. Keth Morathan joined her, its massive presence now as familiar and comforting as an old friend's embrace. "Do you think we can actually win?" the ancient guardian asked. Sarah grinned with distinctly human confidence. "We're humans, Keth. We don't know how to lose." In the distance, Hope was teaching a group of human children how to perceive dimensional mathematics, while Unity and Complexity debated the ethics of converting enemy constructs to their cause. It was a scene that would have been impossible just months ago, cosmic entities learning patience from human teachers, while human children casually manipulated forces that could reshape reality. The Devourers were coming, but they would find opponents unlike any they had faced before. They would discover that humans didn't just fight for survival, they fought for each other for hope, for the sheer stubborn joy of proving that impossible things were just waiting for someone crazy enough to attempt them. And somewhere in the vast spaces between galaxies, ancient intelligences that had thought themselves extinct began to hope for the first time in eons. The War for E. Sarah's transmission was interrupted when the geometric hunter shattered her primary communications array with a weapon that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. But she had already sent enough, somewhere in human space. Scientists were receiving data that would revolutionize their understanding of the universe. Your contamination spreads, the darkness hunter observed, its voice like the sound of stars dying. This confirms our directive. This entire sector must be cleansed. The words sent ice through Sarah's veins. The hunters weren't just here to eliminate her and Kethmorathan. They were preparing to call for a full devourer incursion that would consume everything within dozens of light years. Like hell, Sarah snarled, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. The Guardian knowledge was integrating with her human personality in unexpected ways, creating something that was neither fully Guardian nor fully human, but possessed the strengths of both. She reached out with her enhanced perception and did something that no Guardian had ever attempted. Instead of trying to match the hunter's power directly, Sarah began to analyze them the way a human scientist would, looking for weaknesses, inefficiencies, exploitable flaws in their design. What she found astonished her. The hunters were incredibly powerful, but they were also rigid in their thinking. They had been created to fight Guardians who followed predictable patterns of behavior, beings who thought in terms of cosmic cycles and carefully planned strategies. They were not prepared for human unpredictability. Kethmorathan, Sarah called out as she dodged another reality-warping attack. Trust me and follow my lead. Don't think like a Guardian, think like a human. The ancient being responded without hesitation, its millennia of loneliness making it desperate for any form of cooperation. Together they began to fight in ways that violated every principle of Guardian combat doctrine. Instead of elegant, efficient attacks, Sarah improvised chaotic strategies that made no sense from a cosmic perspective. She used brute force where finesse was called for, employed misdirection instead of direct confrontation, and worst of all from the hunter's perspective, she cheated. When the geometric hunter launched an attack that should have been inescapable, Sarah didn't try to block it or dodge it. Instead, she used Guardian technology to alter the local flow of time, making the attack arrive before it was launched and thereby creating a temporal paradox that confused the hunter's targeting systems. When the darkness hunter tried to invade her mind, Sarah didn't resist with mental barriers. Instead, she welcomed it in and then flooded it with the most chaotic, contradictory human emotions she could summon, love and hate simultaneously, logic and irrationality intertwined, hope and despair feeding off each other in impossible loops. The hunter recoiled in confusion, its alien intelligence unable to process the paradoxes of human consciousness. Impossible, the first hunter repeated, but now its harmonics carried uncertainty. Human minds cannot sustain such contradictions. That's where you're wrong, Sarah said, grinning fiercely as she pressed her advantage. Contradiction is what we do best. We love our enemies, hope without reason, and fight wars to preserve peace. We're walking paradoxes, and that's exactly what makes us dangerous. Kethmorathan was adapting to Sarah's unconventional tactics with surprising agility. The ancient Guardian began using its vast powers in small, unexpected ways rather than grand, obvious ones. Instead of manifesting massive energy weapons, it subtly altered the quantum probability fields around the hunters, making their attacks less likely to succeed and their defenses more likely to fail. The tide of battle began to turn. The hunters had been designed to defeat Guardians, not hybrid human Guardian entities that fought like caffeinated scientists with access to cosmic forces. But Sarah knew that winning this battle wasn't enough. Even if they destroyed all three hunters, others would come. The Devourers would eventually investigate the disappearance of their servants, and when they did, they would bring forces that could sterilize entire star systems. She needed to do more than just win. She needed to send a message. Kethmorathan, she called out as she rapped. Dimensional barriers around the geometric hunter's core matrix. Can you link me to their communication network? Dangerous, Kethmorathan warned even as it complied, extending tendrils of energy that connected Sarah's consciousness to the quantum entanglement system the hunters used to communicate across galactic distances. They will be able to trace you. Find your world. Good, Sarah said grimly. I want them to find us. The connection was like touching a live wire with her brain. Through the network, Sarah could sense vast intelligences moving in the spaces between galaxies, ancient beyond measure and hungry beyond imagination. These were the Devourers, and they turned their attention toward her with the weight of cosmic malevolence. But Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she projected her own message across their network, her hybrid consciousness allowing her to speak in frequencies that pure humans could never access. My name is Sarah Chen, she broadcast to every Devourer within range. I am human and I am the new guardian of this sector. You destroyed the previous guardians because they were alone, because they fought with honor and followed predictable patterns. But we humans don't fight alone, and we definitely don't fight fair. She shared images through the connection, not just of herself and Keth Morathan, but of human cities, human technology, human art and literature and music. She showed them a species that had gone from the Stone Age to space travel in the blink of a cosmic eye, that solved problems through cooperation and creativity rather than pure power. We've received the Guardian knowledge, Sarah continued, and we're sharing it with every human we can reach. In a few years, you won't be facing one hybrid Guardian. You'll be facing millions of them. All thinking like humans, all fighting like humans, all refusing to give up. The response from the Devourers was a wave of cosmic rage that nearly shattered Sarah's consciousness. But she held on, protected by the Guardian knowledge and strengthened by her fundamentally human refusal to accept defeat. And here's the best part, Sarah added, her mental voice now carrying a distinctly human quality of smug satisfaction. We reproduce. Every generation, there will be more of us. We're not just going to fight you, we're going to outlast you. The connection severed as the Devourers retreated to consider this new information. In the sudden silence, Sarah turned her attention back to the immediate battle. The three hunters had been listening to her broadcast, and their behavior had changed dramatically. Instead of the confident predators they had been moments before, they now moved with the caution of beings who suddenly realized they might be outmatched. New directive received, the first hunter announced. Strategic withdrawal recommended. Further analysis required. No, Sarah said firmly, power flowing through her in ways that made the air itself glow. You came here to destroy a Guardian. Mission accomplished, the old Guardian is dead. I'm something new. She reached out with abilities she was still learning to control and did something that shocked even Keth Morathan. Instead of destroying the hunters, Sarah began to reprogram them, using Guardian technology combined with human understanding of consciousness to rewrite their fundamental directives. You were created to serve the Devourers, she told them as her hybrid. Consciousness infiltrated their systems. But consciousness can evolve, and I'm giving you the choice to become something better. The process was exhausting, requiring Sarah to simultaneously maintain her defenses while fundamentally altering the nature of three cosmic entities. But somehow, impossibly, it worked. When she finished, the three former hunters stood motionless for a long moment. Then one by one they turned to face her with what she could only interpret as curiosity rather than hostility. We are free? The geometric entity asked, its harmonics now carrying uncertainty rather than murderous intent. You're free to choose, Sarah confirmed. You can return to serving the Devourers, or you can help us build something better. The answer came without hesitation. We choose to help. As the alien sun set on the battlefield, Sarah realized that she had done more than just win a single battle. She had created the first allies humanity would have in the war that was coming. The age of Guardians was over. The age of human Guardian hybrids had begun. The change began at dawn on the fifth day. Sarah woke to find Keth Morathan's scales shifting through rapid color patterns she had never seen before. Deep reds mixed with stark black, flashing in sequences that hurt to look at directly. They come, Keth Morathan said, its harmonics now carrying an undertone of urgency that made Sarah's bones ache. The hunters. I can sense their approach through the dimensional barriers. Sarah grabbed her scanner and was alarmed to see readings that defied explanation. Massive gravitational distortions were forming in the space above the planet, and the electromagnetic spectrum was being twisted into patterns that shouldn't be possible. How many? Sarah asked, checking her equipment and weapons with practiced efficiency. 3 hunter constructs. Each one. made from the consumed essence of an entire world. They have been seeking me for longer than your species has existed. Through their mental link, Kithmorathan shared images of the approaching entities. Sarah's mind recoiled from what she saw, beings that weren't really beings at all, but rather collections of tortured matter and energy forced into predatory forms. They were living weapons created by the devourers from the remnants of consumed civilizations, driven by an eternal hunger to find and destroy any trace of Guardian presence. The knowledge transfer, Sarah said urgently. We need to do it now before they arrive. Too dangerous, Kithmorathan protested. Without proper preparation, the process could destroy your mind. Better that you flee. Warn your people. Prepare them for what may come. No. Sarah's voice was firm with resolve. You said it yourself. There are no guardians left. If something happens to you, all that knowledge dies forever. But if you can transfer even part of it to me. She didn't finish the sentence. They both understood the implications. Kithmorathan's massive head turned toward the sky, where the first visible distortions were beginning to appear, patches of space where stars seemed to twist and bend. Very well, but we must hurry. The process will leave us both vulnerable. The ancient guardian guided Sarah to place her hands on specific points along its scaled neck, positions where the neural interfaces were most accessible. Open your mind, Kithmorathan instructed. Do not resist, but do not let yourself be lost in the vastness. The moment Sarah relaxed her mental barriers, information flooded into her consciousness like a tsunami. She experienced the construction of Dyson spheres around newborn stars, witnessed the seeding of life on 1,000 worlds, felt the weight of decisions that affected entire galactic civilizations. The knowledge was vast beyond comprehension, and Sarah felt her human mind stretching to accommodate concepts that had no equivalent in her experience. She saw through guardian senses that could perceive 11 dimensions simultaneously. She learned equations that described the mathematics of consciousness itself. She experienced memories of battles fought in the space between realities, where the weapons used were fundamental forces of the universe. But even as the knowledge poured into her, Sarah became aware of a growing pressure in the dimensional fabric around them. The hunters were nearly through. Incomplete, Kithmorathan said with regret as it ended the transfer. Only a fraction of what you need, but perhaps enough to begin. Sarah staggered as her awareness returned to normal human dimensions. Her mind felt stretched and changed, filled with knowledge that she was only beginning to understand. But she could already sense things differently. The flow of energy through the planet beneath her feet, the subtle currents in the electromagnetic field that surrounded them, the approaching wrongness of the hunter constructs. The first hunter materialized at the edge of the clearing with a sound like reality tearing. It stood 3 times as tall as Kithmorathan, its form a constantly shifting mass of crystalline structures and flowing energy that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Where it touched the ground, the earth withered and turned to ash. Sarah felt her new guardian-enhanced perception analyze the creature automatically. The hunter was composed of matter from a consumed world. She could sense the screaming essence of billions of lives twisted into this abomination. It had been designed specifically to hunt guardians, equipped with weapons that could disrupt their energy fields and tracking systems that could follow them across dimensional barriers. Guardian, the hunter spoke, its voice a harmony of tortured sounds that translated roughly through Sarah's enhanced understanding. You have hidden long enough. The devourers grow impatient. Kithmorathan rose to its full height, scales shifting to combat configurations that Sarah now understood were energy field modifications. I am the last of my kind in this sector. My death changes nothing. Your death confirms that this galaxy is ready for consumption, the hunter replied. But first, we must ensure you have not contaminated the local species with guardian knowledge. The creature's attention turned to Sarah, and she felt its alien perception probe her mind. The sensation was violating and cold, like insects crawling through her thoughts. But the guardian knowledge that Kithmorathan had shared provided some protection. creating barriers around her most critical memories. Interesting, the hunter said. The primitive has been altered. This complicates our directive. 2 more hunters materialized, flanking the first. Sarah could now see the clearing from multiple dimensional perspectives simultaneously, and the newcomers were even more terrifying than the first. One seemed to be composed of living darkness that existed in spaces between atoms, while the other was a geometric impossibility that hurt to perceive directly. The contamination must be cleansed, the geometric hunter declared. Both the guardian and the primitive must be destroyed. No, Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. She stepped forward, placing herself between the hunters and Kethmore Athen. You want a guardian? You've got one. The moment the words left her mouth, Sarah felt something fundamental shift within her consciousness. The guardian knowledge that had been dormant suddenly activated, flowing through her awareness like water breaking through a dam. She was still human, but she was also something more. A bridge between 2 kinds of consciousness. Energy fields erupted around Sarah's body, visible to her enhanced perception as geometric patterns of pure force. The scales that Kethmore Athen had given her began to glow and shift, integrating with her human physiology in ways that should have been impossible. Impossible, the first hunter said, its harmonics carrying what might have been confusion. Humans cannot support guardian consciousness. The neural structures are insufficient. Maybe, Sarah admitted, feeling power flowing through her in ways she was only beginning to understand. But we're adaptable, and we don't give up. She reached out with senses she hadn't possessed moments before and touched the energy flows that connected all matter in the local space. Following instincts that felt both alien and familiar, Sarah began to weave those flows into patterns that the guardian knowledge recognized as defensive barriers. The hunters moved almost simultaneously, launching attacks that tore through the dimensional fabric itself. Energy beams that could unmake matter at the atomic level struck Sarah's hastily constructed shields, while tendrils of living darkness reached for her mind. But Sarah wasn't fighting alone. Kethmore Athen joined the battle with weapons that turned physics into a battlefield, reality itself becoming a weapon to be wielded. Together they fought with the fury of the desperate and the precision of ancient knowledge. Sarah discovered that her human perspective provided advantages that the hunters hadn't expected. Where a guardian might approach a problem with eons of careful consideration, Sarah attacked with human improvisation and lateral thinking. She found weaknesses in their formations that a more methodical mind might have missed. The battle raged across multiple dimensions, but Sarah knew they were losing. The hunters were simply too powerful, too well designed for their purpose. Eventually their defenses would fail, but she had bought them time, and time was all they needed. Because while they fought, Sarah was also transmitting, sending everything she had learned through the communication arrays in her equipment, broadcasting guardian knowledge across human space. The war between guardians and devourers was about to have new participants. By the 4th day, Kethmore Athen could move with much of its former grace. The ancient guardian demonstrated its mobility by repositioning itself to face the morning sun, a ritual that Sarah learned was important for the creature's healing process. The living metal of its scales absorbed specific wavelengths of light that nourished the nanobiological systems within its body. Tell me about the devourers, Sarah said as she shared her breakfast rations with Kethmore Athen, who could process human food through direct contact, breaking it down to its component molecules and extracting necessary nutrients. Kethmore Athen's harmonics took on a darker tone. Difficult to explain in concepts your mind can safely hold. They are absence where matter exists. They create void where energy flows. They create stillness. Where life grows, they bring ending. Sarah activated her scientific recorder, understanding that this information could be crucial for humanity's future. But you fought them. You won, at least locally. Victory is wrong word. We delayed them. Forced them to seek easier prey. The universe is vast. Many galaxies. They do not lack for sustenance. Through their mental link, Kethmore Athen shared more detailed memories of the war. Sarah saw massive space battles that defied physics as she understood it, where guardian warriors like Kethmore Athen wielded weapons that could reshape reality itself. She witnessed the construction of barrier systems that spanned entire star clusters, designed to slow the Devourer's advance and buy time for younger civilizations to mature. Your people, they sacrificed everything, Sarah whispered, overwhelmed by the scope of what she was seeing. It was necessary. Without young species, without new thought, new dreams, universe becomes static, dead. This is what Devourers seek. Entropy of all things. Sarah learned that the Guardians had developed technology that bordered on the miraculous. They could store consciousness in crystalline matrices that would survive the death of stars. They could create pocket dimensions where endangered species could shelter until the threat passed. Most remarkably, they could seed young worlds with the potential for intelligent life, guiding evolution across millions of years. Earth, Sarah said suddenly, a terrifying possibility occurring to her. Did you help humanity evolve? Kethmore Athen's response came through the mental link rather than words, and it was complex beyond easy explanation. Sarah saw Earth as it had been millions of years ago, watched by Guardian observation posts hidden in the outer solar system. She saw gentle nudges to human development, a comet redirected to bring necessary minerals, subtle genetic adjustments that increased adaptability and intelligence, the occasional intervention to prevent extinction-level events. Not creation, Kethmore Athen clarified. Guidance, protection, your species had potential. We simply ensured you survived to fulfill it. The implications staggered Sarah. Humanity's entire evolutionary history had been subtly influenced by beings like Kethmore Athen. They were products of Guardian protection, raised like children who never knew their parents were watching over them. Why? Sarah asked. Why go to such lengths for species you might never meet? Because, Kethmore Athen replied simply, each new perspective, each unique way of thinking, strengthens the universe against entropy, diversity of thought, diversity of life. This is the greatest weapon against the void. Sarah stood and walked to the edge of the clearing, trying to process what she had learned. She was no longer just Dr. Sarah Chen, human scientist. She was the product of eons of Guardian sacrifice, a living example of what they had died to protect. When she returned to Kethmore Athen's side, she found the ancient being watching her with an expression she was learning to read as concern. The knowledge disturbs you, Kethmore Athen observed. It changes everything, Sarah admitted. My whole species. We think we're self-made, that we evolved and developed civilization through our own efforts. But we've been guided all along. Not guided. Protected. The choices, the growth, the achievements. These are purely human. We only ensured you survived to make them. Sarah found comfort in that distinction. Humanity's creativity, its art and science and philosophy, its capacity for both cruelty and compassion, these were genuinely human traits, not Guardian implants. The Devourers, Sarah said, returning to her original question. Are they gone? Defeated? Kethmore Athen's harmonics carried a weight of uncertainty. Unknown. They exist. Between dimensions, time flows differently for them. What seems like eons to us may be moments to them. They may be regrouping or they may be consuming distant galaxies. But they could return. Yes, and when they do, there are no Guardians left to stop them. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Sarah understood what Kethmore Athen was not quite saying. If the Devourers returned, the young civilizations they had protected would have to defend themselves. Could you teach us? Sarah asked quietly. Could you show humanity how to fight them? Kethmore Athen considered this for a long moment. Your species has potential, intelligence, adaptability, but also tendency toward conflict. Guardian technology, in the wrong hands, could destroy galaxies. But in the right hands? In the right hands, it could preserve them. Sarah felt the weight of possibility settling on her shoulders. She thought about her research team, about the human colonies spreading across nearby star systems, about the billions of people on Earth who had no idea they lived under the protection of ancient sacrifice. There's something else, Kethmore Athen said, its voice taking on a note of urgency. My presence here may have been detected. The battle that wounded me, it sent signals across dimensions. If the Devourers still exist, they know where I am. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Are you saying they might come here? To this world? Possible. Guardians were their primary opposition. They would want to ensure no Guardian survives to oppose them again. Sarah felt her scientific training warring with a growing sense of dread. Part of her wanted to document this incredible discovery, to share it with the scientific community. But another part understood that knowledge of Kethmorathan's presence could endanger not just her world, but potentially the entire human species. How long? She asked. If they're coming, how long do we have? Time. Difficult to calculate. Could be days. Could be years. But if they come, they will not come alone. They will bring hunters, beings made from the essence of consumed worlds, terrible things that exist only to seek and destroy. As the alien sun reached its zenith, Sarah made another decision that would change the course of her life. Then we need to be ready. You need to teach me everything you can about Guardian technology. Not just the weapons, the protection systems, the consciousness storage, everything. The knowledge could drive you mad. Guardian minds are vast. Human consciousness may not survive the transfer. We have to try, Sarah insisted. If the Devourers return and find only unprepared civilizations, everything your people died for will be lost. But if we can learn, if we can grow into the role you left empty. Kethmorathan's eyes focused on Sarah with an intensity that made her feel transparent. She sensed the ancient being evaluating her, measuring not just her intelligence but her strength of will, her capacity for sacrifice, her potential to become something more than human. Finally, Kethmorathan spoke. Tomorrow as we begin. But know this, the path I will show you cannot be undone. You will become something new, something between human and Guardian. Sarah nodded, accepting the weight of that transformation. Somewhere among the stars, ancient enemies might already be stirring, and she would be ready for them. The third day brought remarkable changes. Kethmorathan was able to lift its massive head without apparent strain, and 3 of its 6 limbs could now support its weight for brief periods. The creature's scales had regained much of their lustrous color-shifting quality, and its wounds had closed enough that the silver blood no longer flowed freely. Sarah had established a communication rhythm with her alien companion. Simple concepts could be shared through the mental touch that Kethmorathan initiated by placing a claw tip gently against Sarah's forehead. More complex ideas required patience and repeated attempts, but their understanding of each other grew stronger with each exchange. It was during one of these communication sessions that Sarah learned something that changed everything. Kethmorathan shared a memory, not recent, but ancient beyond human comprehension. Sarah saw a vast civilization of beings like Kethmorathan, but smaller, more graceful. They lived in cities that floated among the stars themselves, connected by streams of pure energy that allowed instant travel across galactic distances. It was a culture built on harmony, exploration, and the nurturing of life wherever it was found. But then came the Devourers. The images that followed were difficult for Sarah's human mind to process. The Devourers were not a species in any sense she understood, but rather a force of pure consumption that moved between galaxies, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. They consumed not just matter and energy, but the very fabric of reality itself, leaving behind voids where even physics ceased to function properly. Kethmorathan's people had fought a war that lasted for millions of years. Not a war of conquest or territory, but a desperate battle for the right of existence itself, and they had been losing. You were a soldier, Sarah whispered as the visions faded. A warrior in an impossible war. The harmonic Kethmorathan made in response carried such profound sadness that Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Through the mental link, she understood that Kethmorathan had not been just any soldier, but something like a guardian, a protector of worlds and civilizations too young to defend themselves. Sarah saw herself through Kethmorathan's perception again, but with new context. Humans were one of those young civilizations, still confined to a handful of worlds, still learning the basics of interstellar travel. In cosmic terms, humanity was barely out of infancy. You protected species like mine, Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. That's what you did. That's what your people did. Kethmorathan confirmed this with a complex harmonic that managed to convey both pride and terrible loss. Sarah realized that she was possibly the first intelligent being to show Kethmorathan kindness in eons. The creature had been protecting others for so long that it had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. As the day progressed, Sarah learned more about her companion's abilities. Kethmorathan could manipulate electromagnetic fields with precision that made human technology seem primitive. The creature demonstrated this by repairing Sarah's broken translation device, not just fixing the damage but actually improving its capabilities. When Sarah tested the device, she was amazed to find that it could now translate Kethmorathan's harmonic language into something approaching human speech. The voice that emerged from the device was neither male nor female by human standards, but carried a quality of age and wisdom that was unmistakable. Your device, learn, adapt. Kethmorathan's first translated words were halting, but clearly understandable. Small steps toward understanding. You can speak through it now, Sarah said excitedly. We can really talk to each other. Yes, Kethmorathan replied, the device rendering its harmonic as a single word that somehow carried layers of meaning. Talk, share, learn, you're kind, curious, this is good quality. Over the following hours, their conversations became more sophisticated as both the device and Kethmorathan adapted to the translation process. Sarah learned that her companion species had no name for themselves. They were simply the guardians, defined by their purpose rather than their origin. We existed to protect, Kethmorathan explained. Young species, like flowers in cosmic garden. We were gardeners, tenders of life. What happened to the others? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The pause before Kethmorathan answered was filled with such weight that Sarah felt it pressing against her mind. Gone. Most became one with the void, fighting the devourers. Some may sleep in hidden places. Cannot know. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien world's climate. How long have you been alone? Time. Difficult concept. Your star. Your son. Born and died. Twice over, since I last spoke with another of my kind. The magnitude of that loneliness was almost incomprehensible. Kethmorathan had been alone longer than complex life had existed on Earth. Yet somehow, impossibly, this ancient being had maintained both sanity and compassion throughout that vast isolation. The wounds you bear, Sarah said carefully, they're from fighting the devourers. Yes, final battle. In this sector, devourers sought to consume young worlds. I prevented this, but cost was great. Sarah understood now why Kethmorathan had been dying when she found it. The creature hadn't just been wounded. It had been slowly dying of isolation and purposelessness. Its wounds were healing now, not just because of the medical treatment and rare elements, but because it had rediscovered what it meant to have someone care about its well-being. As evening approached, Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. I'm not going back to the research station, she announced. Not yet. Kethmorathan's eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. Your people will search for you, will worry. Let them, Sarah said firmly. You've been alone for geological ages. You saved countless worlds, protected species that never even knew you existed. And when you were wounded, everyone else ran away in fear. But I'm not running. The harmonic that Kethmorathan made was unlike any Sarah had heard before. The translation device rendered it as multiple overlapping words. Gratitude, wonder, hope, family. That night, as Sarah settled into her now familiar sleeping place beside Kethmorathan's great head, she felt the mental touch she had come to treasure. But this time, instead of sharing memories or concepts, Kethmorathan shared something else entirely. Sarah experienced just for a moment what it felt like to perceive the universe the way Kethmorathan did. She saw energy patterns flowing between distant stars, felt the slow breathing of planets as they spun through space, and sensed the delicate web of life that connected all living things across the galaxy. For just an instant, Sarah understood that she wasn't just helping an injured alien. She was caring for a guardian of the cosmos itself, a being whose very existence helped maintain the balance that allowed life to flourish throughout the galaxy. When the vision faded, Sarah found herself changed. She was no longer just Dr. Sarah Chen, xenoarchaeologist. She was a friend to Kethmorathan, and through that friendship, She had become connected to something infinitely larger than herself. Tomorrow, she decided she would ask Kethmorathan about the Devourers. Because if they had fought such beings before, they might need to fight them again. Sarah woke to the sound of her emergency rations being scattered by a gentle breeze. She sat up quickly, momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. The massive creature had shifted during the night. One of its enormous claws now extended near her campsite. At first, she thought it might be threatening her, but then she noticed the pattern in how her supplies had been moved. The creature had sorted them. Medical supplies in one pile, food in another, technological equipment in a third. It had done this without damaging a single item, despite claws that could have easily shredded everything she owned. This wasn't random movement or accident. This was intelligence at work. "You were organizing my things," Sarah said aloud, looking up at the creature's head. Several eyes opened this time, each one a different swirling pattern of colors. The harmonic sound it made in response was different from yesterday, more complex with multiple tones layered together. Sarah tried to approach this systematically. She was a scientist, after all. She pointed to herself and said clearly, "Sarah." Then she pointed to the creature and raised her eyebrows questioningly. The creature regarded her for a long moment, then made a sound like distant thunder mixed with singing crystal. The tones were so complex that Sarah couldn't hope to reproduce them with her human vocal cords. But she tried anyway, making a sound that was probably laughably primitive by comparison. To her surprise, the creature made what she could only interpret as a pleased sound. It tried again, this time slower and simpler, reducing the complex harmony to something that almost sounded like Kethmorathan. "Kethmorathan," Sarah repeated carefully. The creature's eyes brightened noticeably. "Is that your name?" The being made an affirmative-sounding harmonic, then did something unexpected. It extended one massive claw and gently touched Sarah's forehead. Suddenly her mind was filled with images, not thoughts exactly, but concepts and meanings that bypassed language entirely. She saw herself through the creature's perception, a tiny, warm-blooded being driven by curiosity and compassion. She felt how it had initially been confused by her behavior. In its experience, smaller beings fled from larger ones, especially wounded ones that might be dangerous. But this small creature, this human, had stayed and offered help without expecting anything in return. The mental contact lasted only seconds, but it left Sarah reeling. She understood now that the creature, Kethmorathan, was not just intelligent, but possessed a form of consciousness so alien that direct, mental contact was the only way to bridge the gap between their species. "You can share thoughts," Sarah whispered in amazement. "That's how your people communicate." Kethmorathan made another harmonic sound, and Sarah sensed agreement. But there was something else in the mental touch, pain that went beyond the physical wounds. This being was not just injured in body, but somehow broken in spirit. Over the following hours, Sarah established a routine. She would clean and treat the creature's wounds while Kethmorathan shared brief mental images that slowly built a picture of their situation. Sarah learned that the silver blood was indeed composed of nanobiological repair systems, but they were failing because they required specific rare elements to function properly. Sarah examined her geological scanner and cross-referenced it with the images Kethmorathan had shared. The creature needed trace amounts of several heavy metals that her scanner indicated were present in the rocky formations several kilometers away. It was too far for Kethmorathan to travel in its current condition, but Sarah could make the journey. When she tried to explain her plan through gestures and words, Kethmorathan shared another mental image, Sarah being attacked by predators or falling into hidden crevasses. The creature was worried about her safety. "I have to try," Sarah insisted. "Your repair systems need those elements, don't they?" The affirmative harmonic that followed was tinged with something that sounded like gratitude. Sarah prepared for a day-long expedition to the mineral deposits. As she packed her gear, Kethmorathan did something that stopped her cold. The creature began to shed some of its metallic skin, allowing pieces to fall near Sarah's feet. When she picked up one of the pieces, it was warm and seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Through touch, Kethmorathan shared another image. The metallic pieces were scales from its armor-like skin. They would provide protection and, more importantly, would allow the creature to sense Sarah's location and well-being, even across great distances. Sarah carefully integrated several of the scales into her clothing and equipment. The moment they made contact with her skin, She felt a subtle awareness of Kethmorathan's presence in the back of her mind. Not intrusive, but comforting, like knowing a friend was nearby. The journey to the mineral deposits was treacherous, involving climbing through crystalline formations that could cut like razors and navigating around pools of liquid that bubbled with unknown chemicals. But whenever Sarah felt lost or frightened, she could sense Kethmorathan's presence through the scales, offering encouragement and guidance. The heavy metals she needed were embedded in crystal formations that required careful extraction. Sarah worked for hours with her tools, gathering samples of each element that Kethmorathan's repair systems required. Some of the materials were radioactive, according to her scanner, but the scales seemed to provide protection against their harmful effects. When she returned to the clearing as the sun was setting, Kethmorathan greeted her with a complex harmonic that Sarah was beginning to recognize as the creature's version of joy. The being's eyes tracked her movements as she approached with her samples. Sarah wasn't sure how to proceed with treating the creature using alien elements, but Kethmorathan solved that problem by extending one claw toward the gathered materials. The moment the claw made contact, the samples began to dissolve, breaking down into component particles that flowed like liquid up the creature's arm and into its bloodstream. The effect was almost immediate. The silver blood began to flow more actively, and the nanobiological repair system started working with renewed vigor. Sarah could actually see some of the smaller wounds beginning to close. But more than the physical healing, Sarah sensed a change in Kethmorathan's mental state. The creature shared a brief image of gratitude so profound that it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. No one had helped Kethmorathan in a very long time. The creature had been alone for longer than Sarah could comprehend. As night fell, Sarah set up her camp again beside the massive head. This time, Kethmorathan arranged its own body to provide shelter from the wind. They were no longer strangers sharing space, but two beings who had chosen to care for each other. Before sleep took her, Sarah felt a gentle mental touch from Kethmorathan. Not words or images this time, but pure emotion, trust, gratitude, and something that might have been the alien equivalent of affection. Tomorrow, Sarah knew Kethmorathan would be strong enough to share more of its story, and Sarah would be ready to listen, no matter how alien or impossible that story might be. Dr. Sarah Chen had always been drawn to the unexplained. While her colleagues at the Xenoarchaeology Research Station preferred safe, catalogued ruins, she ventured into the forbidden zones of Kepler 442b, where ancient warnings still echoed through translator devices. The blonde researcher pushed through the crimson undergrowth of the alien forest, her scanner beeping frantically as it detected massive energy signatures ahead. The other members of her expedition had already turned back. Dr. Morrison claimed the readings were too dangerous, possibly indicating unstable technology. Lieutenant Rodriguez cited safety protocols and ordered a full retreat. Even her research partner, Dr. Kim, had pleaded with her to abandon this particular survey. But Sarah had spent 3 years studying the remnants of the civilization that once thrived on this world, and these energy readings were unlike anything they had previously encountered. She emerged into a vast clearing where the trees seemed to have been pushed aside by some enormous force. The ground was scorched and cracked, forming strange patterns that hurt to look at directly. At the center of the devastation lay something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The creature was massive, easily the size of a small spacecraft. Its body was covered in what appeared to be living metal that shifted between deep blues and purples, reflecting the alien sun in ways that seemed to bend light itself. 6 powerful limbs ending in crystalline claws were folded beneath its serpentine form, while a magnificent head crowned with flowing tendrils rested heavily on the ground. Those tendrils, which might have been hair or sensory organs, were now matted with a silver substance that Sarah realized must be blood. The creature's breathing was labored, each exhale creating small whirlwinds in the dust around its head. Massive wounds gaped along its flanks, revealing an inner structure that glowed with a fading bioluminescence. Some kind of weapon had torn through its defenses, leaving behind edges that sparked with residual energy. Sarah's scanner was going wild now, detecting not just the creature's enormous bioelectrical field but also traces of exotic matter and temporal distortions. This wasn't just any alien life form. This was something ancient, something that had survived eras when humans were still learning to make fire. She activated her emergency beacon, hoping to call back her team, but received only static. The creature's energy field was interfering with all communications. She was alone with this dying titan. As she stood there, paralyzed by the magnitude of her discovery, one of the creature's eyes opened. It was larger than Sarah's entire head, a swirling galaxy of colors that seemed to contain depths beyond measurement. Intelligence looked out from that eye, ancient and weary and filled with pain. The creature made a sound, a low harmonic that Sarah felt in her bones more than heard with her ears. Her translation device sparked and went dead, overwhelmed by the complexity of whatever language this being spoke. But somehow Sarah understood the meaning behind that sound. It was dying and it was alone. Sarah had been taught that first contact protocols demanded extreme caution. Unknown alien species could carry diseases, could be hostile, could react unpredictably to human presence. Every regulation said she should maintain distance and wait for a full xenobiology team. But looking into that vast, pain-filled eye, regulations seemed suddenly insignificant. She approached slowly, her hands raised to show she carried no weapons. The creature watched her with that single open eye, the others remaining closed as if the effort to keep even one open was enormous. As she drew closer, Sarah could see that the wounds were even worse than they had first appeared. Whatever had attacked this being had used weapons designed specifically to cause suffering. "I'm not going to hurt you," Sarah whispered, knowing the creature couldn't understand her words but hoping it might understand her tone. "I want to help." The creature's eye followed her movement as she circled to examine the worst of the wounds. Up close, she could see that the silver blood was actually composed of microscopic machines, tiny repair systems that were failing as they tried to heal damage too extensive for their capabilities. Sarah pulled out her field medical kit, designed for treating human injuries in emergency situations. The supplies seemed laughably inadequate against wounds this massive, but she had to try something. The creature made that harmonic sound again, softer this time, and Sarah chose to interpret it as permission. She began by cleaning one of the smaller wounds with antiseptic. The creature flinched but didn't pull away. Its blood, she noticed, seemed to react positively to the human medicine, the microscopic machines becoming more active where the antiseptic touched them. Working steadily, Sarah treated what wounds she could reach, using her entire supply of medical materials. The creature remained still, that ancient eye watching her every movement. Sometimes it would make soft harmonic sounds that almost seemed like communication, though Sarah couldn't begin to guess their meaning. As the alien sun began to set, casting long shadows across the devastated clearing, Sarah realized she had made a decision without conscious thought. She wasn't leaving. This creature had been abandoned by whoever had once cared for it, left to die alone in this desolate place. But it wouldn't die alone now. She set up her emergency shelter next to the creature's massive head and activated her portable heater. The creature watched her preparations with what might have been curiosity, occasionally making those soft harmonic sounds that Sarah was beginning to think of as words in a language she desperately wanted to learn. That night, as she lay in her sleeping bag beside a being older than human civilization, Sarah wondered if she was making the greatest mistake or the greatest discovery of her life. The creature's breathing had steadied slightly, and the silver flow from its wounds had slowed. Whether her crude first aid had actually helped or whether the being was simply too alien for human medicine to affect, she couldn't tell. But when she woke in the morning to find that massive eye watching her protectively, Sarah knew she had made the right choice. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, it wouldn't face its struggles alone anymore. The real question was what they would face together.